Hey, this is a quick overview on the most common techniques we find for NetApp troubleshooting. This, by far, is the most common tool we use for NetApp troubleshooting. It is proving that you do not actually have an issue with your NetApp performance. The most important thing to track, obviously, for most NetApps is the latency of the read and write requests they serve. If you get a complaint about the performance from perhaps the DBA saying he blames the storage for being slow, and you can immediately go look at a graph and say, nope, latency, write latencies around a millisecond, read latency is even quicker. And if you can look at the history on that, and you can see over the last 7 days, it's been pretty damn consistent. Hasn't gotten any slower. Over the month, hasn't gotten any worse. So, first thing DBAs or application admins blame is the storage. May be the case, but it may not be the case. And if you have something that can show very quickly that it is not the case, then you've just saved yourself a whole bunch of time rather than having to dig into command line systats and so forth. What happens when the DBA says there is an issue, and there is an issue? So as an example of that, say the DBA who's running, this volume here, says things were fast and they suddenly got slow. All right, yes, it looks like, if we zoom in at what the latency was really quick, less than 0.2 milliseconds, and then it suddenly got slow. Jumped up to 20 milliseconds. Not terrible, but certainly slower than it was. But more concerningly, the number of operations per second dropped. What happened here on this NetApp? One of the handy tools in LogicMonitor is we have tools that show you overviews of the aggregate. Obviously, you only want to see on an aggregate level the volumes that share an aggregate, because if the volumes are on different aggregates, they're not going to impact each other, at least not in terms of spindles. So looking at the aggregate overview, we can see the average aggregate latency jumped. If the volumes share an aggregate, they're going to share similar latency characteristics. And if we look here at the operations per second by volume, we were doing a fairly steady state on our database volumes and vol 0, but then when things slowed down, look, we had a QA server come online that's been putting additional workload on the filer that's been exceeding its I/O performance capabilities. So we can drill into that a bit more. If we go look at the QA volume here, the QA server suddenly started putting on an extra couple of hundred read and write requests per second on this NetApp. Obviously exceeded its I/O capabilities, caused latency, affected the database. Now we know the storage is actually having an issue, but more importantly, we know what volume caused it and how we can resolve it. We can move that QA server volume to another aggregate, or just go tell the person running QA not to do it during production hours. Those two tips, having the latency performance for any volume available immediately, and being able to see the top 10 volumes on an aggregate by the operations per second, save you a lot of time. Whatever tools you use, make sure they have those capabilities. Thanks.